day as we begin with prayer, and we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And those are partly ceremonial, but they're purposeful as well. And obviously the prayer is important. We base our actions hopefully on those things that are divinely inspired in some sense. And I'd just like to remind us that as the founders were developing the Constitution, they were coming to so many impasses that they finally realized they hadn't stopped to pray about things. And so they did, and once they had done that, the Constitution came together quite quickly after that. So it's important to remember that. And also as we make the pledge to the flag, the Pledge of Allegiance, we should bear in mind that we have this constitutional obligation to both the United States and the state of South Dakota. So these are important things, ceremonial in some ways, but important as well. So with that, leading us in prayer today is Reverend John Armstrong of the Fort Pierre Ministerial Association. And after that, following the Pledge of Allegiance, will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Carter Lane of Warner and Jessica Benson of Rapid City.
Let us bow in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this day and the joys and the challenges that it brings. Loving God, each of these representatives is here because they have a desire to serve the people of our state with wisdom, compassion, and love. As they meet this day and every day, we pray you would send your knowledge and courage to their hearts and minds as discussions are held, as information is shared, and as decisions are made. Guide them by your wisdom to allow them to have calm hearts and open minds, so that all people may have dignity and a sense of worth. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk will call the roll.
Allers, Anderson, Bartles, Barthel, Bartling, Beal, Bordeaux, Bruner, Campbell, Carson, Chase, Clark, Conzett, Dennert, Diedrich, DeSanto, Duval, Fry, Mueller, Glanzer, Goodwin, Gosh, Greenfield, Lana, Haugard, Holly.
Here.
Heineman, Holmes, Howard, Hunhoff, Jameson, Jensen, Kevin, Johns, Johnson, Kaiser, Carr, Ketwig, Lake, Latterell, Lesmeister, Livermont, Lust, Marty, May, McCleary, McPherson, Mills, Otten, Herman, Peterson, Kent, Peterson, Sioux, Pischke, Quam, Rasmussen, Reed, Roden, Ring, Rounds, Rosem, Schaefer, Shanefish, Smith, Soley, Steinhauer, Stevens, Tolson, Turbeville, Wheezy, Willardson, Wismer, York, Zickman, Mickelson. Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Thank you. The next order of business is approval of the journal.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Chief Clerk of the House has had under consideration in the House Journal of the 11th day, all errors, typographical or otherwise, are duly marked in the temporary journal for correction, and we hereby move the adoption of the report. Respectfully submitted, G. Mark Mickelson, Chair.
There's a second. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. Aye. All those opposed? Journal is approved. Reports of standing committees.
The Committee on Health and Human Services respectfully reports that Senate Bill 32 do pass, Senate Bill 17 and 60 do pass and be placed on the consent calendar. Respectfully submitted, Wayne H. Steinhauer, Chair. The Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources respectfully reports that Senate Bill 26 do pass, H. Bill 1115 do pass as amended, HCR 1003 was adopted, HB 1089 was deferred to the 41st legislative day. Respectfully submitted, Herman Otten, Chair. The Joint Committee on Appropriations respectfully reports that House Bill 1045, 1064, and 1098 do pass. House Bill 1090 was deferred to the 41st legislative day. Respectfully submitted, David L. Anderson, co-chair. The Committee on Taxation respectfully reports that HB 1076 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Stephen H. Haugard, chair. And the Committee on Transportation respectfully reports that HB 1107, 1116 do pass as amended. House Bill 1117 do pass as amended and be placed on the consent calendar. Respectfully submitted, Mary Duval, chair. Also, Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Office of Engrossing and Enrolling has carefully compared House Bill 157 and finds the same correctly enrolled. Respectfully submitted, G. Mark Mickelson, chair. Mr. Speaker, there being no objections, the House proceeds to signing of House bills.
The Speaker signs an act to authorize the Board of Regents to contract for the construction of the Madison Cyber Labs and the demolition of Lowry Hall at Dakota State University. The Speaker signs House Concurrent Resolution 1002 recognizing the great need and offering support for additional mental health services in western South Dakota.
Messages.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to transmit herewith Senate Bills number 2530, 34, 71, 77, and Senate Joint Resolution number 1, which have passed the Senate and your favorable consideration is respectfully requested. Respectfully, Kay Johnson, Secretary. Also, Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to return herewith House Concurrent Resolution number 1002, in which the Senate has concurred. Respectfully, Kay Johnson, Secretary. Also, Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to return herewith House Bill number 1057, which has passed the Senate without change. Respectfully, Kay Johnson, Secretary.
All right, thank you. If the House would come to order so the clerk can read the proceedings. Moving on to motions and resolutions.
Representative Quam moved that House Bills 1128, 1129, 1135, and 1166 be referred from the Joint Committee on Appropriations to the House Committee on Appropriations.
Being a second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries.
House Bill 1005, commending and recognizing the numerous contributions made by South Dakota's social workers and recognizing March 2018 as National Social Work Month.
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Johnson.
I move that House Concurrent Resolution 1005, as found on page 171 of the House Journal, be adopted.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. House Concurrent Resolution number 1005 recognizes the contributions of the social work profession to our South Dakota communities, and it recognizes March as the National Social Worker Month with the theme Social Workers, Leaders, Advocates, and Champions. South Dakota has over 1,000 social workers living and working in our communities. They work for the most vulnerable in our society, including our veterans. The United States Department of Veterans Affairs is, in fact, one of the largest employers of social workers in our state. I would like to mention at this time how proud I am of my daughter, Karen Nicole Roth-Schaefer, who is herself a social worker with a 2014 master's degree in social work from the University of South Dakota. At some point in life, we will all need a social worker. And I now ask the state legislature to officially recognize the multitude of roles that professional social workers play in South Dakota. Help me pass that message on, and please vote green on House Concurrent Resolution 1005. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you, Representative Johnson. Any further remarks? I think I jumped the gun on that. Any further remarks? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine, and the members will proceed to vote. Representative Peterson.
Personal privilege.
Granted.
On behalf of Representative Shanefish and myself, we'd like to welcome the Delmont Kukin and Harvest Festival folks that were in town, that are in town, and we're serving some kukin on the floor of the rotunda today. Thank you for the kukin and the Dakota Splash Water we had delivered on our desk. The Kukin Festival is the second weekend in September, the 8th and the 9th. From Delmont here we have Dick and Erla Strid, Glenn Stern, Dale Weiser, Don and Barb Hoffman, former Senator Frank Klochek, who was the original founder of Delmont Day here in Pierre, Mike Williams, and then I'm going to defer the rest of my time to the good representative from District 19.
Representative Shanefish. Your mic's not on.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Representative. To the left in the gallery, we have joining the Delmont crowd today is the Happy Memories Gospel Band. Earlier today, they provided music in the rotunda, and tonight they will be playing at the Women's Prison here in Pierre. Members of the band with us today include Morris Bieber from Tripp, Bonholm County Commissioner John Houck, and my mom, Loretta Shanefish from Scotland.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the treats and for the talent.
Representative Conzett, Livermont, Peterson, Sioux, Roden, and Mickelson. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk may reveal the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are yeas 64, excused 6.
Motion carries.
Representative Quam moved that Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 2 be deferred to Tuesday, January 30th, 2018, the 13th legislative day.
There's a second. Any remarks? No remarks. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll move on to consideration of committee reports.
Representative Quam moved that the reports of the Standing Committees on Education on House Bill 1099, as found on page 164 of the House Journal, also Judiciary on House Bill 1053, as found on page 165 of the House Journal, also Commerce and Energy on House Bill 1088, as found on page 166, and House Bill 1082 is found on page 167, and House Bill number 1094 is found on page 168 of the House Journal be adopted.
The motion having been seconded, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the first reading of House bills. For those of you in the gallery, this is a constitutional obligation that we have to read these bills at first time and then address them a second time, but they'll be read the first time in this fashion so that it meets the constitutional obligation. All right, first reading of House bills having been completed. The House Bill 1214, 1217, 1219, and 1225 are assigned to Ag and Natural Resources. House Bills 1207, 1193, 1233, 1231 are assigned to House Appropriations. House Bill 1202 and 1192 are assigned to Joint Appropriations. House Bills 1185, 1200, 1210, 1213, 1220, 1223, 1224, 1234, and 1236 are assigned to Commerce and Energy. To Education, House Bills 1188, 1194, 1197, 1198, 1215, 1221, 1232. To Health and Human Services, House Bill 1205. To Judiciary, House Bills 1189, 1191, 1204, 1208, 1209, 1212, 1222, 1228, 1229, and 1230. To Local Government, House Bill 1235. To State Affairs, House Joint Resolutions 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, and 1010. Also, House Bills to State Affairs, House Bills 1186, 1196, 1199, 1201, 1203, 1211, 1216, 1218, and 1227. To Taxation, House Bills 1206 and 1226. To Transportation, House Bills 1184, 1190, 1195. And to Government Operations and Audit, House Bill 1187. First reading of Senate bills. In regard to Senate bills, first reading of Senate bills, committee assignments by the Speaker, Senate Bill 25 and Senate Bill 34 go to Ag and Natural Resources. To Health and Human Services, Senate Bill 30 and Senate Bill 71. To State Affairs, Senate Bill 77 and Senate Joint Resolution 1 goes to State Affairs. Consent calendar items.
House Bill 1105, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the validation of absentee ballot signatures. House Bill 1095, an act to revise certain provisions regarding clerk magistrate jurisdiction. House Bill 1097, an act to revise certain provisions regarding magistrate court jurisdiction over vulnerable adult protective or restraining orders. House Bill number 1101, an act to revise certain provisions regarding used motorcycles offered for sale at an event. And Senate Bill number 18, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the South Dakota Board of Technical Education.
Thank you. Consent calendar bills having had their second reading are up for consideration and final passage. Are there any questions on those consent calendar items? Seeing none, the question before the House is final passage of bills on the consent calendar. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and the members will proceed to vote. Representative Smith.
Personal privilege.
Granted.
Members of the body, I bring you greetings from Representative Carnsoli. In honor of Carnsoli and Sean McPherson, next Wednesday, it is Make Cancer Top Priority Day, where you can wear your suits and sneakers. And so I'd ask, in honor of those two members of this body that are fighting the good battle right now against cancer, we represent this body by wearing our sneakers, but you got to remember to bring them back to Pier. So that's why I'm telling you to do it today. So wear those sneakers next Wednesday and fight cancer. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Appreciate that reminder, and appreciate the communications that many have had with both Representative Soley and Representative McPherson. So we'll try to keep everybody updated as much as possible.
Representative Bordeaux, DeSanto, Greenfield, Lana, Holmes, Livermont, McClary, and Turbeville. Representative Turbeville.
Turbeville is excused.
Turbeville excused. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Madam Clerk, please display the vote.
Excuse me. Turbeville votes aye.
Turbeville votes aye.
Mr. Speaker, there were yeas 64 and 6 excused.
Consent bills having received a majority vote of the members elect are hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the titles? Hearing none, titles are deemed correct. We'll move on to the second reading of House bills.
Representative Qualm moves that House Joint Resolution number 1001, House Bill number 1081, and House Bill 1102 be placed to proceed House Bill number 1103 on today's calendar.
There being a second, any remarks on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
House Joint Resolution number 1001, proposing and submitting to the voters an amendment to the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, removing the legislature's authority to set legislators' salaries for a regular legislative session.
House Joint Resolution 1001, having had its second reading, is up for consideration of final passage. Are there any remarks? Mr. Speaker. Representative Mickelson.
Mr. Speaker and members of this body, this is not an issue that I ever thought I'd be bringing to you and advocating that you support. So I'm going to tell you how I got here. I've voted on this issue as a member of this body previously, and I've not supported it. Like some of you, the political cost was not worth the gain, because I recognize that most of us here do this out of sense of civic obligation. And this is largely a citizen legislature. But we have an executive committee of the legislature, and as Speaker, I'm a member of that committee. We had a strategy retreat, and what came up in that was you have the lowest funded legislative branch of government in terms of the amount of state dollars that are expended, and you have the lowest amount of legislative staff. And so I know that some of you have been frustrated with your ability to enact change that you believe needs, and so we've looked at increasing some staff in some areas, and Legislative Research Council brought this to us under the prior executive committee. They had done a fair amount of research, and they had a recommendation. And here's what that research would tell you. Well, we first gave the legislature the authority to set its own pay via a constitutional amendment in 1946. Since then, we've raised our pay 8 times. That happened once every decade, twice in one, until we got to the 2000s, at which time since which we have not raised our pay. The last time we've touched legislative pay successfully was in 1998. So we said, well, what's the right way to do that? Do you want to vote on it here in the body? Or do you want to go ahead and ask your bosses for a raise, the voters? And unlike you, I think there's a fair amount of support for the work that, unlike some of you, I think there's a fair amount of support for the work that you do and a lot of appreciation that you come out here and do it. Now, I will tell you this, there's not very much of understanding how long you're here or what you get paid. You come out here 9 weeks in the winter and a number of other days during the interim for which you're paid $6,000 a year. When we considered alternatives on how to address this, we looked at what other states do. Most states, there's either the legislature sets its own pay or there's a commission appointed by the legislature and the governor. Sometimes it's binding, sometimes it's not. The model that we're here recommending, or I'm here proposing to you, is something that I think the public can relate to. It ties our pay to how the average median household income in South Dakota is doing, how the average family is doing. So if the households in this state are doing better, then every year your pay would go up correspondingly. Similarly, when we're in a down agricultural economy and the average household income maybe is declined, then your pay would go down. Now here's the surprising part for anyone that's listening on the internet. The pay would be set at 20% of median household income. I think most people think that we do, many people think that we're in Pierre most of the time. I'll run into people in Sioux Falls and they'll say, hey, why aren't you out in Pierre? I said, well, we kind of start the second week in January and we finish the second week in March, and that's when we're here. So this proposal would set the pay at 20% of median household income, and it would take away your authority, the legislature's authority, to set its own pay. And some people say, hey, we're here to make hard votes. Let's make that hard vote. Let's go ahead and raise our own pay. Well, most all of us come from the private sector. Okay? How many of you in the private sector have been able to go set your own pay? Do you have to go talk to your boss? Does someone have to approve it? So I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to ask the voters to go ahead and evaluate our performance and decide whether or not they think this is a good idea. Now the other thing, we were in state affairs, and I asked everyone in state affairs, I said, raise your hand if you're self-employed or retired. There are, I think, 13 members on state affairs, and all 13 members raised their hand, because we're the people that have the flexibility to be able to do this. So this was reinforced to me early in this week. I had a message to call a gentleman back home by the name of Dan Johnson. Dan's a friend of mine. We're in a Bible study group. I don't know him really well, but he had an issue with a child of his, and so it was kind of a constituent call. And he was talking me through it, and he was really fired up. He's a good man. He runs a cemetery, the Catholic cemetery in Sioux Falls. And he goes, well, geez, I really appreciate it. He goes, I'd love to do what you do. I said, well, come on. We always need good people. Why don't you run?
Tulsa yields.
And he goes, well, I can't afford it. So the purpose here of this would make a modest step up in income, would I hopefully allow a broader pool of candidates to come consider serving here in the legislature. I appreciate the forthcoming debate, and I would appreciate your support to put this on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further remarks? Yes, Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a substitute motion.
And what is it? Has the motion been formulated into a printed copy? Is it
No.
As a printed amendment? Okay.
No. It's just a voice motion to defer action on this bill until the 28th legislative day.
Having made a motion to defer it to the 28th legislative day, and there being a second, any remarks on the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason I jump up and ask you to defer action on this bill is because in my talks in our whip groups and with a lot of other folks from this honorable body, this issue in our minds is directly tied to state employees' raises, of which we don't have an answer for right now. So I'm just asking this body to defer action on this bill until our appropriators have the time to find out if the rest of the state employees are going to get a raise. I know for me and others I've spoke to, voting on this right now could seem hypocritical, as the outlook right now looks like state employees are not getting a raise. So I want to have a full picture in front of us when we're making a decision that is so politically charged and can end up being very emotionally charged for a lot of people. So I'd ask you to scream yay with me, and we'll just wait till we get a better picture. Thank you.
Further remarks, Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I'm going to stand in support of deferring. I've had a lot of individuals come to me and express concern about our revenue and our expenses and about what we're prioritizing this year in a time of shortfall. I can assure you the Appropriations Committee is working very hard to address these issues and prioritize accordingly. But based on some of the concerns that I've heard regarding, is this appropriate time and or what's the appropriate amount? Is this the right amount? And if we did defer it, it gives us just a little more time to get a better picture of how these puzzle pieces are going to come together financially, and we can still make this decision, but we'll just have a better idea of what the rest of our budget will look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Representative Mickelson.
Well, one thing that's different about serving in Pierre than in our nation's capital is that we come out here and we vote. Okay? Now this vote, if it's a hard one for you, I get it. But vote. Don't kick the can, because it ain't going to get any easier. Two things. First is this. This would take effect for the 2020 legislative session. So we're not even in next year's budget if this passes. Okay? Two things. Guess what the state employee raise was in 1998? 3%. Guess what the state employee raise was in 1999? 2%. 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2 to 3%. What'd you guys give yourselves? Respect starts with self-respect, okay? Now you're worth it. And the world isn't always fair, and everything doesn't always happen at the same time. You guys have gone 20 years. You shouldn't feel bad. You work hard, and you make a sacrifice to come serve. This money doesn't compensate you fully for it, but this vote does not get any easier, okay? So I would ask, in the respect of going ahead and making this decision today, defeat this motion, debate the proposed resolution on the merits, and let's pass it. Thank you.
Representative Qualm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would certainly agree with the previous speaker. This vote is not going to be easier. We don't know, obviously, where it's going to be. But to tie this to employee pay, I don't think we're talking about the same thing here. We're talking about two different animals. We're talking about something that we have not done for 20-plus years to this body. And I've been here, this is my 6th year. There's probably at least 3 of those years when something has come up about pay. I've never voted for any of them. I don't think in the political climate anything's good. It's not going to be easier now or the 28th day. I think each and every one of us in here knows how we feel, knows where we want to vote. I don't think it'll change. I just don't see that happening. I don't know where this is going to go. I think this is the right way, but you have to decide what is the right way. I just think we need to make this vote now. Then if there's something else we want to talk about, if this doesn't pass, then we can do that. But please defeat the motion. Let's move on. Let's debate this. Let's get her done.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ladrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to add a bit of information that I'm sure many of you already know, but if this motion is defeated and we vote on this today and we pass it today, it has no impact on the current year's budget. It goes to the voters. If they make a decision in the affirmative, then the pay will be increased years down the road. It'll impact a budget that we have no idea about, and it'll be a decision by the voters. I just wanted to remind everyone of that.
Thank you, Representative. Any further remarks? Any further remarks? Representative May?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a hard one for me, too. I understand that we do need to address it. I really get that. I look across and, we all become this great big family here, and we all have different lives, and we're all struggling to try to take care of all our constituents at home. And I'm in a tough district. I have one county's, the good representative from Buffalo would probably disagree with me, but we're among one of the poorest counties in the nation, and so we're used to making a lot of sacrifices down there. And although I know that we don't make much money here, I get that, and I could give figures on what it costs me to try to represent constituents, because there is a financial cost to it, but there is also a very big emotional cost to it. A lot of people give up, a lot of family time, miss a lot of ball games, and I just don't think we've done a very good job getting that message out to people. I'm like the good representative from Minnehaha County. People just think we're down here all the time, I guess. I don't know. But that goes back to we don't have South Dakota government in our schools anymore. People don't understand government. But I would feel more comfortable, and I hate to go against my friend from Minnehaha County, but it would be a little easier for me to maybe go back to my constituents this weekend and be able to visit with people a little bit, and maybe try to get our message out about where we are. It would make the vote a little easier for me. So I guess that's kind of where I stand. I am not against a pay increase by any means, because I do think that everybody down here works very hard, and we need to be compensated for our sacrifices. Thank you.
Further remarks? Representative Willardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm having trouble with the logic here. Keep in mind, for most of the dates that the speaker listed off where we increased pay for the state employees, I voted for those and voted for several of them since. What does the state employees' pay have to do with it, really? If we apply that logic, then why aren't we saying, well, what about our health providers, the nurses that work in nursing homes, and the janitors that work in nursing homes? We don't have a pay increase for them this year either that's been in the governor's budget. Why don't we use that logic? Or what about the teachers? We don't have anything in the governor's budget to increase teacher pay. It's the same logic. It's because it doesn't apply. We haven't changed our pay since 1998. What were you making in your regular occupation in 1998? Mr. Speaker, I think we need to defeat this amendment and go on
and pass the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative
Mr.
Willitson.
Speaker,
Representative Carson.
are we debating the bill, or are we debating the motion that the good representative from Aberdeen put down?
Simply the motion to defer to the 28th day. Representative Gosh.
I guess it's just a quick on the motion. You know, again, I don't think anybody's arguing anything. I think what we're trying to get is just more information and more time. I think that's what the motion is. I think it's a great idea. I think they've done their due diligence, and it's a wonderful idea. And I think we probably all agree on it. There's a few of us who are just asking for a little bit more time. That's all. So I'd encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Representative Dennert, solely on the motion to defer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to rise in opposition to the substitute motion. We all know that when this is going to send it to crossover day, we're going to be awfully busy on crossover day. We're going to have a full calendar. We're going to be dealing with a lot of bills. I think it's best that we deal with this now. We take the vote now. We talk to our constituents about this bill now, rather than waiting and waiting and waiting. The last time that we increased pay, I was 3 years old. So I think it's time for a vote, so.
Thank you, Representative Dennert. Any further remarks strictly on the motion to defer the bill to the 28th day? Any further remarks? Hearing none, the motion is to defer HJR 1001 to Friday, January 23, 2018, the 28th legislative day. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Motion fails. We'll move on to the discussion of the bill. Yes, Representative Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment, Juliet 1001.
Has it been distributed?
Yes, it has.
Do you wish to move it at this time?
Yes, I do.
There's a second. Are there remarks on the motion?
There was a little discussion when we had this in State Affairs and before it about when this would go into force, because it says we'll take it up. If we pass this, we'd vote on it in the next election. And there were some people that felt that it could mean the next election that we have, which is the primary election. And the intent is to be the general election. And just to make sure that there is no concern or question on anybody's part, all this does is inserts the word general in there so that we would vote on this if it passes. The public would vote on it at the next general election. Please pass the amendment.
Representative Mickelson.
I support the amendment. Thank you.
Any further remarks just on the amendment? Hearing none, the question being Representative Hawley's motion to amend HJR 1001. Does all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. So the bill as amended, HJR 1001 as amended. Any further remarks? Representative Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to stand up in support of the bill. We did discuss this in the executive committee. It's as we all know, extremely volatile discussion. For me, it's a real simple decision because it's not for myself. I've made my decision. I know what I was getting paid when I came out here, and I was in a position in life when I could do it. Even though I've had an interest, I was not in that position for several years. And if we look around on what we want to have in our legislature, we want to have a good cross-section of South Dakotans. And we truly don't have that, to be honest. You're all good people, but you're not a broad cross-section that we really need to be talking about. And to me, it's not whether I'm getting a pay raise or if we haven't had one for 20 years. I see it as an enabler to allow some good people in the middle of their life when they're starting a business, they're starting their family, they're raising the kids, and they really can't donate money to come out here. And we need to get more of those out here. We do have some good middle-aged, younger than middle-aged people out here now.
but that's not common. So I see it as a simple vote. We need to broaden who's able to come out here and be part of the discussion. So please support this motion. We're sending it to the people. They will make the decision if that's a legal argument or not and valid, but let them make that decision. So please support this.
Further remarks, Representative Conzett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like it to be a matter of public record because there's a lot of disillusionment about how much we get paid to come here. We get paid $6,000. Now, the first few years when you run, as you guys know, you go to everything, even the opening of an envelope, because you want to have your name out there. And for the first 4 years, I kept track of everything that I did. And when I broke it down with what we get paid, it was 0.0034 cents an hour.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Representative Ring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm torn by this one too, but there are a couple general areas that I think need to be considered here. The first is more a matter of political science than economics, and I don't claim to be a political scientist, but I'll jump in anyway. It's my understanding that most people who have expertise on the Constitution believe that this kind of detail doesn't belong in the Constitution, and I agree with that. I particularly agree with it in this particular case because let's suppose we pass this resolution, let's suppose that the voters agree, and we end up at 20% of the median household income. We know that very often it's hard to change the Constitution, so I'm not even sure about my assumption that this resolution, this proposed change would pass. But if it does, we may find down the road that we think it's appropriate to provide more than 20% of household income, and it's going to be very difficult for us to do that. We've tried to change the 5 cents a mile. I think 3 times that we've voted on that maybe, and the people don't seem to want to go along with that. And I'm afraid we might come in with the same kind of situation here. What we're really doing, in a sense, if we pass this, is we're passing the buck. We're taking away from ourselves the opportunity, but also the responsibility of setting our own salary. That's what we're doing if we put this into the Constitution. I think that's a bad idea. Now, as to the fact that we're underpaid, we are. I agree that what we're doing is limiting ourselves to retired people like myself and people who are self-employed, who have that kind of flexibility. We need to broaden the diversity of this body. I'm not sure another $4,000 is going to do that. Where was I here? Where's my next number? I also feel that right now, it really is hypocritical for us to give ourselves an increase when I've been talking the last couple nights to people who run assisted living centers, people who run the community provider, the people who are the community providers. It's going to be kind of tough for me to talk about an increase and then go back on Saturday to a Cracker Barrel where I know there are going to be a bunch of university employees and other state employees probably. To do that, given the current budget constraints, even though it's the total amount of this proposed increase is minimal, really, in the big picture. The image that presents of doing that at the time that we have the kind of budget constraints that we have is simply not a good idea. One more thing that I missed. In the proposed constitutional amendment, and I hate being a nerd like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I believe it just says 20% of the median household income. There's more than one measure of median household income. I suppose we could, by statute, decide which one we're going to use, but I think that in itself is maybe a bit of a potential problem. On balance, increasing our salaries is, our pay is needed, is very important. The way that we're proposing to do that here is not the right way, and this isn't the right time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ring. I appreciate the comments. Any further comments? Any further remarks? It's an important subject. It's a good thing to get the word out. So, Representative Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we're forgetting about what the ballot's going to look like in November. Is it going to be 2 pages, 3 pages? There's going to be so much stuff on there. We couldn't get a 5-cent pay raise on our travel the last time it was on there because people get so frustrated, and this ballot is so huge. By the time they get to the place to check for us to have a pay raise, they've lost it. There's too much stuff on there. They can't understand it. They feel demeaning because it's so cumbersome. They don't even know if they vote yes, if that means yes. If it vote no, does that mean no, the way it's worded in some of those initiated measures? So if you think this is going to pass in the ballot, I think you're dreaming. If you want a pay raise, give yourself a pay raise. But if it goes on the ballot, it's going to go down in defeat.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Further remarks before Representative Mickelson speaks for a second time? Representative Mickelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's, you know, I don't really practice law, but I spend time around people that do. Some of you here that aren't here today. But, you know, you can nitpick a deal, or you can just say it's the right thing to do. Because here's the thing, this isn't perfect. Now, you find me that first perfect piece of legislation you vote on and let me know, because they don't exist. Okay? Second thing is, I don't think passing this is passing the buck. I think it's going to your boss and saying, what do you think? How we've been doing? It's a chance for us to educate our constituents that really this is an act of civic service and that most of us are self-employed or retired. There's a lot of important points of view in my community that don't get represented in the legislature. So for those of you who think that we have an issue that needs to be addressed, here's my question. What's your solution? Because it's really easy to shoot holes in someone else's idea. Okay? Wasn't even my idea. I just happen to think it's pretty good. Good enough. Better than nothing. So if you got an alternative, bring it to the House floor and let's vote on it. Otherwise, you dispose of what's in front of you today. That's your job. If you don't like this, you don't think we deserve it, beat it. That's I'm fine with that. What else? Oh, well, 2 things. First of all, this language, now seldom, this language, 68.5% of the people in Alabama thought it worked in 2012. Okay? They figured out how to make it work. Now, there's only one difference in that language. You know what the legislative pay in Alabama is? As a percent of median household income, anyone have a guess? 100%. Now, how many days do you think they serve in Alabama? Half a year? 30 days. All right? We're pretty humble here in South Dakota, aren't we? Okay, I'm just telling you, you guys are worth it. Okay? And so are the people that come behind you. The other thing, that last comment on the ballot, I actually have great faith in the voters. I do. You had a couple people that ran a payday lending cap. I'll be honest, I didn't vote for it. Okay, I'm a freedom of contract guy. You had a guy out of Georgia spend $3 million against it, and they still won with 70% of the vote. Okay, so go out, work your campaigns, tell them why you think this is a good idea if you do. I'd urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. There being no further remarks, the question before the House is final passage of House Joint Resolution 1001 as amended. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
Representatives Marty, May, and Pischke.
Representative Marty, May, Pischke. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there were yeas 38, nays 26, excused 6.
House Joint Resolution 1001, having received a majority of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct. And I
House
believe our
Bill 1081, an act to extend the effective date of certain provisions regarding the recreational use of non-meandered water.
House Bill 1081, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Roden. House, please come to order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, it is a privilege to bring to you House Bill 1081 today. And before I go any further, Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk, 1081 AA. It has been distributed, and I would like to move it at this time.
Is there a second? Any remarks on the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I speak to the bill and the amendment?
Yes. And is there a second amendment along with it? No, I'm asking, is there a second amendment you want to move at this time, or are you going to take this one in order?
No, Mr. Speaker, the second amendment is a title amendment, so we'll hold action on that.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I don't feel compelled to burn a lot of time, given the situation we're in. This is a bill similar, House version to the Governor's Bill, Senate Bill 24. We all know the story behind that. We know where we're at. You know, been a lot of discussion on how to move forward, how to help the process along and do what we can in this chamber to encourage our colleagues in the Senate to move forward on the issue. We had a special session after a long summer of very arduous, very intense meetings with, you know, dozens and dozens of individuals testifying, many organizations. I do have to say this, and I've said it before, you'll hear me say it again. In my 16 years in the legislature, I honestly feel like this was I will say it was the best piece of legislation I've ever had to have privilege of working on. The process we went through to come to consensus and compromise, the people we heard from, the special session, the debate, and here we are. The final hurdle we have to overcome is obviously the Senate moved the sunset up to this year. I think they did us a favor in one way, because we've had since June for Kelly Hepler and the GF&P to implement this program. So talk about a great trial period and a great asset in Kelly Hepler that worked overtime to get this program up and running. And it's been a huge success. And I don't think by anybody's estimation you could say otherwise. The lakes are open, the program's working. I've been looking at the information as far as the number of the acres of lakes that are open. We use different numbers, but you can boil it down. There's something like 540-some thousand acres of non-meandered waters in the state. That's not necessarily a relevant number, because there's about half of those acres are not accessible. So they're really kind of a moot point. I suppose if the flooding continues, that number will go up. So you boil that down to 244,000 acres of actual meandered waters that are in question here. 4,700 of those acres have been closed. There's another 4,500 acres that were the injunction acres. They were part of the lawsuit. But understand this. On those acres, that still leaves 233,000 acres of non-meandered fishable waters that are open. Something like 95%, doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, Kelly's been working with the landowners on those acres that are closed to open them up. His biggest hurdle is the fact that we have a sunset. There's no certainty into the future. So that brings us today and the amendment and the bill. I thought it was interesting in State Affairs, one of the opponents' testimony was, and I'll paraphrase, but I think this is pretty close to direct quotes. It said, deleting the sunset clause is a responsible, respectful thing to do because of the history of this issue. If the proponents say they need more time, then deleting the sunset will give them all an unlimited amount of time. The sunset clause is partially kicking the can down the road. It's better than what we had before, but we can amend the current law anytime. I believe that, as we talk through this, I've never, through the process, people on both sides of the issue opposed the sunset, but it was part of the compromise to provide assurance as we went forward with this. I think it's the right thing to do for this body to, at least in the House version, we already have a different version in the Senate, to delete the sunset clause, pass this bill forward, and get it in the hands of the Senate. We have 1,000 different options that could take place in the next few weeks as far as how this plays out. But it guarantees that we have another bite at the apple if we pass a different version to the Senate than what they have camped over there that they're holding right now. So I think it's just common sense legislation, and it has been a privilege for me in my years to be involved in this discussion. And I hope in my heart of hearts that we can continue to pull in the harness together at moving this issue forward. Because I understand the differences of opinion within this body. But I think I've heard general consensus that they agree that this was a good piece of work. And it's been too great a success to take the risk in going back to where we were before. Because that, ladies and gentlemen, that can happen. And we, as a responsible representatives of the people of South Dakota, need to take every step to make sure that doesn't happen. If it does, we will have dropped the ball in a huge, huge way. I'd urge your support of the amendment and the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Representative Pischke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to ask the body to resist this amendment. It's my understanding, and I listened to all the summer studies and everything over the airwaves and all the committee hearings, and the way that this bill became law, the way that we got to the summer session one of the concessions was that we put a sunset date on this. That sunset date was 2021. If we're going to do this, we need more time. I mean, I don't see any fear. I don't see the reasoning why we can't just, if we want to go through this, let the program play out. Let's see how many more bodies are water closed. I mean, we're up to, I don't know what it is, 17 bodies, something like 12 bodies, I don't know. But let's at least leave the sunset date on. We can go from there, I guess. I mean, to me, I don't think that we should take off the sunset date at this time. Let's leave it on. Let's continue to mold this legislation and see if we can come up with something better. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Representative Qualm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The sunset, I think, is vital that it goes away for now. I guarantee you this is not the last time we will see this legislation. There's other things that will be happening. There's other things that will be coming forward. Will it stay off? I highly doubt that. I'm not anticipating that at all. But I think for now, in order to give us a little bit of leverage, a little bit of being able to compromise with the Senate, we need to take this off so that we can have the ability to do that. If we come across the same thing as they got, our opportunity to have any leverage is very, very limited. That was the problem, what happened when they put this on, so we have to deal with it now in special session. There was no leverage we had. This was the agreement we had to the sunset, and if we wouldn't agreed to this, everything would have stayed shut down in the Northeast. There's no way that we could have done that. We had to get those lakes back open for all the businesses and everything out there. So I would encourage you to vote for the amendment and then vote for the bill, and then we move this forward and keep the discussion going. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on the motion to amend? Representative Goodwin.
Question for the sponsor.
State your question.
If we don't extend the sunset, are the boat ramps going to be locked out again?
Representative Roden, you want to take that question?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Appreciate the question. You know, it's a great question and one we need to be clear on, because I've heard different people have different opinions on whether or not they should have been closed in the first place. But from my perspective, aside from what the governor decided, when I read the Supreme Court decision, it was clear. I won't speak for the governor what he will do now, but he's already done it once. Why wouldn't he do it again? But I can speak to what the Supreme Court decision said and how I would interpret it if I was governor. The decision was clear. It says, you shall not facilitate access. And the state was facilitating access. And so if we're following that directive, I don't see that he has any choice. So thank you for the question.
Anything further? Additional remarks, Representative McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to kind of, I guess, go about it in this sense for those of you that maybe don't keep up with what goes on in my district. And Secretary Hepler has worked extremely hard with some of those landowners. But what's happening, and I'm going to express this again, there are some of those landowners that are waiting exactly for this to happen, to get the sunset off, or they're not going to open those lakes up, ladies and gentlemen. That's what this is hinging on. There are some that they know what's going on here, and they're just going to wait. So the sooner we get this off, the sooner he has the ability to open up more area for the fishermen and the sportsmen to come to that area and get on those lakes. That's the one key, in my opinion, that you need to look at right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Further remarks on the motion to amend? Hearing none, the question being Representative Roden's motion to amend House Bill 1081, does any member wish the motion to amend be reread? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Motion carries. House Bill 1081 having been amended, I believe the representative spoke to both the amendment and the bill. Is there any additional remarks that anyone wishes to make this time? If not, hearing no further remarks, question for, Representative May, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the sponsor of the bill. We'd had a discussion on what the landowners had given up in this compromise, and I would appreciate it if you would go over and tell us what all the landowners compromised in this compromise bill.
Representative Roden, you want to answer that question?
Well, let me ask you, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking for some direction. It's been suggested that maybe I would be stepping out of bounds by going outside the scope of this bill. I don't know if that's the case, so I'd ask for your judgment in that before I answer the question.
I think it's an important discussion, and I think it's fair to go ahead and answer that if you wish to, unless there's someone else who would like to.
Well, I would be happy to answer the question if, in your judgment, it's that it's in order to do so.
I'll grant that. Go ahead and answer the question.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Representative Otten. May I make my point of order, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. In my opinion, I guess that this goes outside of the scope of what we're talking about. We know that there's been concessions on both parts to get the previous bill done, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the removal of a sunset date on the legislation. If we were going to get into talking about different points and what went into making the legislation that we had, then you know that's a different context, in my opinion, and we could reopen the debate on the bill for that. My opinion, it goes outside of the scope of what we're looking at and talking about today.
Mr. Speaker, may I inject something?
Well, point of order having been made, I'll accept that observation that it's a point of order that goes beyond the scope of the bill, so we'll just leave it at that. If there's an additional question, Representative May. Go ahead, Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to restate it in a way. So we took the sunset off. We're going to take that off, and my recollection of the debate on the sunset was based off of the compromise that was made before all the parties. So I thought that it would be appropriate that we lay that out there, why we think that it's important that this sunset comes off, because the sunset was directly related to the compromise on both sides for the landowners and the sportsmen.
The Speaker's ruling was to grant latitude and discussion on the amendment and the bill. The point of order was raised, but the Speaker's ruling is that it's to be allowed. Does the objecting member wish to appeal to the body to overrule the Speaker's ruling? Very good. Then discussion will be granted on the amendment and the bill.
Thanks. Representative Roden, do you wish to speak to that?
So to be clear, I'm to respond to the question?
Granting you latitude to go ahead and respond to that question.
Okay. Well, let me say this, because I understand the objections of the former speaker, and I am sensitive to where we're at in the House. So I don't, you know, I don't want to step out of bounds, and I don't want to get on a high horse, and, but I think, you know, I think I will just speak to the process in answering your question. Obviously, the landowners, I think if you want to look at the single biggest thing the landowners gave up, it was long before we had the summer study. It was when it rained on, when the land that they had farmed and paid good money for and paid taxes on and continue to pay taxes on and continue to pay for by an act of God was no longer available to them. That was the ultimate insult, if you will, ultimate compromise. So in the time after that, in the last 20 years, they have lost every right to that land. The process we went through was trying, at the direction of the Supreme Court, was to work together to resolve that issue in a fashion that everybody could live with. I thought we had a great process in doing that. Any number of amendments to do that. You know, there were issues like that came up that I can think of. You know, the fishing. It was, you know, there was a fear that if the landowners had control of access or had the ability to close the water, they would do so and then commercialize the fishing. And so we addressed that issue head on and added an amendment that prohibited commercialization of water that was privatized, that was posted closed. You know, that was just one of the many. The sunset provision was another compromise. You know, I'd have to go back and comb through the records, but again, I think it was a series of compromise, a process on both sides, landowners, sportsmen coming together, hearing testimony from both of them. So, you know, I don't want to present this that I'm trying to represent one side or the other, because I'm not. And let me say this, because I think it's important. I've always felt that I'm a sportsman, a true sportsman, and a landowner. And in my 16 years down here, it has tortured me more than anything else. I've always been on the Ag Committee to see the divide, the gulf between the sportsmen and the landowners. That's what tripped my trigger about this process, because I finally saw, after 16 years, a time when we were coming together and sitting at the table and coming up with a bill that represented bringing them together. At a time in our history when we had a new, fresh face as the Secretary of Game, Fish, and Parks, who was eager to help cultivate those relationships. And I have been excited about it. For the last 4 months since this went into effect, and I've seen the results, I've seen GF&P officers working with landowners to work deals, to continue to work on these deals that I talked about on the injunction lakes and the other lakes, like a former colleague on the far side of the room stated. I'm excited about that. I get really troubled at the thought that it might be in peril some way. So I know I'm going down a bunny trail, but again, I just think it was a great process. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Roden. In light of my ruling in regard to the point of order, Representative Otten, would you like to speak to some of the comments that Representative Roden raised? All right. Further remarks? Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, Representative Qualm.
Now, I'm just up here. Does everybody understand what we're voting on now? I guess all of a sudden that just came to my mind. Does everybody understand that what we're doing to vote now is, without the sunset on there, this is to make this permanent law, what's there, that can be amended by any person at any time. I just want to make clarification that everybody understands that.
All right, thank you, Representative Qualm. Is it Representative Goodwin? Do you have a question?
Yeah, question for the leader.
Yes, go ahead.
Does this extend it then to 2021, 30 June 2021?
No, that the sunset is gone. It extends to perpetuity until it changes.
That was the amendment, to take that off. Representative Otten?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I will be opposing this for these reasons, because I feel that we still need to have some changes, and yes, the process will go on and those opportunities will present themselves down the road, and that's great, but I feel by casting my vote to support this now, I'm saying that I support what's in statute wholeheartedly, and at this time I don't. So my nay vote is because I am looking for some change down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Dodd. Representative Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I guess I'm going to urge you guys to go ahead and vote green on this particular amendment. Right now, the way it is, this is a law with training wheels that we don't even know if it can ride on its own, and we're talking about wanting to change it. So let's take the training wheels off. Let's let the secretary do his job, give him the ability to do what he needs to do. Then let's take a look at changing it. We can change any law at any time with simple amendments and bills. So let's go ahead and do that and then continue through the process. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Further remarks? Representative McCleary.
I'm going to interject just a little bit more, and I'm going to go, we need to know also, it's not just the landowner, it's not just the sportsman on this, you've got the retailers. You've got the lodges, the steakhouses, the C-stores, the gas stations, they're all waiting too. I've got lodge owners and bait shops in my district that lost anywhere from 20 to 40% of their income in that short time when things were closed and we were trying to figure this all out. And I really don't think they want to go back and we have to go through this again. We can make those changes as the former speaker just brought to our attention. We can do that. And anybody here, think of your income and you've lost between 20 and 40%. How do you make that up? It's kind of like us on the farm. We had a drought. We're sure as heck not waiting for another one. But keep that in mind. It's not just a two-party thing here or two individual. It's three. Okay? Landowners, sportsmen, and the retailers in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further remarks? Any further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, question before the House is final passage of House Bill 1081 as amended. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and the members will proceed to vote. While we're waiting for that vote, I'll just announce that the Doctor of the Day, I believe he is here, Jesse Berendo of Mitchell. He's in the back of the chamber. If you'd welcome him. The Doctor of the Day is sponsored by the South Dakota State Medical Association. Today's Doctor of the Day, Jesse Berendo, practices at Avera Medical Group in Mitchell. Prior to that, he served in the Army for 11 years. He was a battalion surgeon in Fort Lewis, Washington, and practiced at pediatric clinics in Washington and Texas. He received his MD from the University of South Dakota School of Medicine, and his specialties are adolescent medicine and pediatrics. He's currently the only physician in South Dakota with board certification in adolescent medicine. He's a member of the South Dakota State Medical Association, and let's welcome Dr. Berendo. Thanks very much for being here, and I think you're probably just a little bit early. The usual viruses haven't started to spread, but we're glad you're here, and there are a few people that have had some problems. But
Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there were yeas 51, 12, nays 12, and excused 7.
House Bill 1081, as amended, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct. Representative Willitson.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield my time to Representative Roden for a title amendment.
I believe that was correct. Thank you, Representative Willitson.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I would like to move 1081 ATA.
There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Representative Willitson and Representative Roden. And I think that we have some birthdays to celebrate. It's my understanding that these birthdays are either today or within a day. Representative Zickman and Representative DeSanto, and also Ty Ketwig, who's with us today. So, Representative Tolson, would you like to lead us in a happy birthday to these folks?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Everybody please stand, and happy birthday, Ty, and Representative Zickman and DeSanto. So on three we'll go. Everybody ready to go? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ty. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
House Bill 1102, an act to clarify certain provisions regarding the Great Seal of South Dakota and to establish a penalty for misrepresentation of the Great Seal.
House Bill 1102, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks?
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Peterson,
I have an amendment.
has it been distributed?
Yes, it has.
Do you wish to move it at this time?
Yes, please. I would like.
Is there a second? Representative Rounds. And would you like to speak to both, speak to the amendment?
Yes, would you like me to speak to the amendment first?
Yes, please.
Okay. On page 2, line 3 of the House State Affairs Committee gross bill, delete 1/2 and insert 1. On page 2, line 4, after seal, insert based upon the South Dakota Constitution, Article 21 and 1 and this section. On page 2, line 8, delete everything after the quotation marks with the period. On page 2, delete lines 9 and 10 and insert section 2, that the code be amended by adding a new section to read, any use of the state seal by a state agency after July 1, 2018 shall comply with the South Dakota Constitution, Article 21 and 1, and 1-6-1 and 1-6-2. Any use of the seal existing prior to that date may continue to be used.
All right. I'll let you go ahead and speak to both the amendment and the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to read then what the language would be with the amendment, if that's all right.
Yes, go ahead.
So the change that we're making in this bill would read, any replica, facsimile, or reproduction of the state seal that is greater than 1 inch in diameter and used for official purposes for a nonprofit commercial use shall be a representation of the full and complete seal. And then we're inserting based upon Article 21, Section 1 of the Constitution and this section, and shall include the state motto, under God the people rule. These requirements do not infringe upon or limit any satirical use, artistic or satirical use of the seal. The Secretary of State shall conduct an investigation for any violation of this section. If the Secretary of State confirms that a violation has been committed, the Secretary of State shall issue a cease and desist letter. And then we're also adding a section to this regarding state agencies and compliance with use of the seal that would say that they are able to use materials and signage that they currently have, but when they are in the process of replacing their current materials and signage, they would replace it with the correct seal if they have seals that are in violation at this point. So that gives you a reading of the amended version. So the bill that we're considering now was intended as a simple and straightforward bill to clarify certain provisions regarding the Great Seal of the state of South Dakota and to provide enforcement power for the Secretary of State when violations occur. We became aware of some potential free speech concerns about the bill, and we worked with interested parties to address those concerns by clarifying that this bill applies only to official uses of the seal and for-profit commercial uses. It does not apply to artistic or other uses which would be considered free speech uses. The concerned parties testified in favor of the bill in House State Affairs. The situation that brought to light violations that were occurring with the use of the seal was when we ordered embroidered clothing from through LRC, and we noticed that the motto was missing. So we went to the Secretary of State, knowing that they were the keeper of the seal, and asked for assistance, and they were very helpful. However, they said they didn't have the power to enforce violations with the use of the seal, and so that's why we drafted this bill, in consultation also with the Attorney General. Just a little bit of history on the Great Seal of the state of South Dakota. It was adopted in 1889, our year of statehood, and its design is established in Article 21 of our state constitution. The concept of the seal and of the state motto are attributed to Dr. Joseph Ward, who was active in early territorial government and was the founder of Yankton College. The seal features an outer ring containing the text South Dakota and the words Great Seal, along with the year 1889. Featured at the top of the inner circle is a state motto, Under God the People Rule. The inside circle features symbols which represent our state's commerce, agriculture, industry, and natural resources. According to South Dakota Codified Law 1-8-2, the Secretary of State is the custodian of the Great Seal, from whom permission must be obtained to use the seal. However, the law is ambiguous regarding enforcement of violations for the improper reproduction of the seal. This bill provides authority for the Secretary of State to enforce the law. The bill as amended also provides that state agencies may have signage with inaccurate representations, may replace with the proper seal when they're reordering supplies, so they don't have to go out and replace everything now. As is so eloquently stated in the description by the writer of the BOA history of the seal, the Great Seal of the state of South Dakota is a symbol of the heritage we as South Dakotans are privileged to enjoy. It provides an appreciation for the inheritance which it represents and is an inspiration for continued pride and faith in the future of our state. I ask you to please vote yes on HB 1102 as amended to protect our important symbol of our inheritance and the inspiration for our future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate that. And just for clarification, we want to make sure you understand there's potentially two amendments that were passed out. This is, the amendment that's been moved is 1102OD. There was also an amendment passed out that was 1102OC, but this is strictly in regard to OD. Further remarks? Representative Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question for the sponsor.
Yes. State your question.
Some years ago, 1989, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision in the Texas versus Johnson case that allowed for the United States flag to be burned if it was part of a political protest. For my own clarification, does your bill protect someone who, for whatever reason, may wish to use our state seal in the same way?
Representative Peterson, do you wish to answer that question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I understand your question correctly, I think you're wondering if this bill would penalize someone who would use this for political type speech. There were concerns about that, and that was not my intent. And so we did work with the interested parties to amend the bill and specifically say that this does not cover anything that would be related to free speech, artistic use, satirical use. And the interested parties who had brought those concerns supported the amendment and supported the bill in state affairs.
Okay.
Representative Holmes.
Forgive me, one more question. You mentioned would cover. Did you mean restrict the use of it if somebody wished for some reason to use the state seal as part of a political protest? That would still be considered legal?
Representative Peterson, you wish to answer a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. This would not penalize that use of the seal. Does that answer your question?
So it would be considered a legal form then of protest?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Further questions on the amendment? Hearing nothing further in regard to the amendment, the question before the body is amendment of House Bill 1102. Does any member, oh, let me just move on, I'm sorry. If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. The bill is amended. Does the sponsor wish to speak further to the bill?
Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I think I spoke both to the amendment and the bill, so I
That was fine.
have no further remarks. Thank you.
Right. Any further remarks at all? Hearing none. Oh, Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question for the sponsor. How does this bill affect artistic use of the seal? Thank you.
Representative Peterson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does not affect artistic use of the seal.
Any further questions or remarks? Hearing no further remarks, question for the House. Final passage of House Bill 1102 as amended. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine, and the members will proceed to vote.
Pischke votes aye. Representative Mickelson votes aye. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
There were yeas 56, nays 6, and excused 8.
House Bill 1102, as amended, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title?
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Peterson.
I have a title amendment 1102 OTA.
Title Amendment 1102 OTA. And there's a second on the motion. Any discussion on the motion to amend the title? Hearing none, all those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. 1102 OTA is passed, and the matter is finished.
House Bill 1103, an act to require state agencies to comply with the appropriate display or use of the state seal.
House Bill 1103. Are there any remarks?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, Representative Peterson.
since we combined the amended provisions of 1103 into 1102, I would move that we table 1103.
Motion to table, a second. That is
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Roden.
Preparatory remarks are not allowed with a tabling motion.
Thank you, Representative Roden. Representative Kaiser, I saw first.
Substitute motion, I would move that we table Bill 1103.
Motion having been seconded, this final action on the bill. Therefore, if there are no further remarks on the motion, non-debatable motion, the motion to table before the body for final action. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine, and the members will proceed to vote.
Fall votes aye. Representative Allers, DeSanto, and Peterson Sue. Pischke. Pischke votes aye. Representative Allers. Allers votes aye. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there were yeas 62 and excused 8.
House Bill 1103, a motion to table, having received a majority vote of the members-elect, is hereby declared passed, and the motion to table is approved. Representative Qualm.
I move we defer the remainder of the calendar till Tuesday, January 29th, the 13th legislative day.
Motion is to defer the rest of the calendar. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Are there any announcements at this time?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Otten.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Ag and Natural Resources, Tuesday morning, 7:45.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Tolson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Local Government, Tuesday at 10 a.m. See you there, 10 a.m.
Representative McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee on Health and Human Services, Tuesday morning at 8:30. Reminded of the time change, 8:30.
And House Taxation will meet at 8:15 on Tuesday. Representative Allers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appropriations Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock. We'll start with the Board of Regents.
Very good, 8 o'clock, Board of Regents appropriations. Further announcements? Representative Beal. Mr. Speaker. Representative Beal. I move we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Motion carries.